The one and the only. C1 Aries of the North. The entire city of Channing was on high alert. A military aircraft was making its landing at the Channing International Airport. Hundreds of soldiers from the Special Forces aligned themselves into neat rows at the airport. Each soldier was dressed in full battle gear. None of them could tear their adulatory eyes away from the aircraft that had just landed. There was a sense of eager anticipation in the air. Nathan Cross made his way down the aircraft stairs after he had exited. His black combat boots creaked with every step he took. Attention. Salute. The strident voice of the officer pierced through the air with a note of authority and discipline. The troops raised their right hand uniformly to give their salutes while greeting him concertedly. Welcome to Channing, sir. He was their general, whose actual name was Nathan Cross, although they liked to refer him as the Aries of the North. That was because he had never lost a battle in his distinguished military career, since the day he had joined the army as a young chap. His track record for the past 5 years had been jaw-dropping when he had led the troops to several significant victories in the north. He had repeatedly defended the borders from invading enemies. The country owed it to his tactical genius and strategic astuteness for the peace and prosperity that it was enjoying today. With a tall and muscular physique, Nathan Cross was an attractive man. His luminous eyes sparkled like diamonds in the dazzling sunlight. Nonetheless, he seemed a little displeased. Knitting his brows together, he muttered to Colin Dunn, captain of the National Guards, "Didn't I tell you to keep a low profile? That's what I've been telling the Channing's authorities, sir. I'd never expected that they would make such a fuss about it. Colin Dunn replied abashedly. Send the troops back and inform them to lift the red alert status, reverting everything to its usual course. The same goes for you. I don't need you to follow me around. I have my own arrangements. Yes, sir. Colin Dunn clapped his heels together and saluted. Nathan Cross strode out of the airport alone, accompanied by a sudden myriad of strange emotions that tugged at his heart, which was a huge departure from his usual calm demeanor. 5 years ago, the grief from his mother's passing had forced him into a drunken stupor and left him sleeping on the streets. A kind-hearted lady took pity on him and tried to give him a hand. But his desires, aroused by drunkenness, got the better of him as he forced her to have sex with him. By the time he had woken up, the lady had left. It had been 5 grueling years for Nathan as he exhausted all the possibilities to find the lady. Unfortunately, all his efforts had come to naught. It was only until recently that he finally got a hold of the information he had been looking for. His sources had informed him that her name was Penny Smith, and that she was still unmarried. She had given birth to a daughter, Queenie Smith, a corollary of their one-night stand. It pained him to think about the dreadful life that the two had to face over the past few years. Now that I've found you, I assure you that there will only be joy and happiness in your lives from now on, he solemnly vowed. I shall give you the wonderful lives that you both deserve. In the meeting room of Diva Limited, Penny Smith was amidst a discussion with her client, Derek Harvey. Dressed in a smart suit, Penny appeared businesslike, yet stunningly attractive. However, her face was full of rage as she glared at the fat, pudgy man in front of her. I'm sorry, Mr. Harvey, but I'm unable to oblige your request. I'm not one of those who would give myself away merely for the sake of a contract. She rejected him indignantly. With that being said, she stood up and turned to leave the meeting room. Derek Harvey stretched out his flabby arms to block her from leaving. Don't be mad, Miss Smith. His lips widened into a nauseous grin, like a hungry wolf baring its fangs. All I'm asking is for you to put on your company's latest lingerie design for couples so that I can get a better sense of how they look on one's body. Leering, he tried to persuade her. Just a small feast for my eyes, that's all I ask. Why don't you just model them for me? I'll place an order for 50 million immediately if I like what I see. That's my stance. Take it or leave it. And to top it off, I'll give you a big fat tip of 1 million as well. How does that sound to you? Please stop harassing me and show me some respect, Mr. Harvey. Respect for you. Derek Harvey shrilled at the top of his voice. Who would respect someone like you after they've found out about your dirty past? Our beloved daughter of the Smith family. Every member of Channing's upper class would cover their mouths and giggled at this open secret. Stop pretending like you're like some pure and innocent virgin in front of me. A shiver ran down Penny Smith's spine. Her face immediately paled when he brought up that ugly incident. It was the ghost that would haunt her for the rest of her life, a perpetual shame that would forever plague the reputation of the Smith family. Just the mention of it was torture to her. She had never expected Derek Harvey to use it, trampling all over her dignity. I don't see the need to explain my personal life to you. Her beautiful face turned frigid. And I've decided to call off our business cooperation with you. There's nothing left to discuss. Goodbye. With his eyes pinned on Penny's alluring body, Derek Harvey refused to relent. He darted his eyes over to the lingerie samples on the table and threatened, "No woman can escape from me once I have my eyes on her. Miss Smith, don't blame me for getting rough if you insist on defying me." His words still resounding in her ears, Penny was instantly cornered by two bodyguards with crooked smiles on their faces. "What are you trying to do?" Penny immediately grew alert. Her voice was thick with rage and fear. "I'm just trying to have some fun with you, Miss Smith. Don't you know how much I adore you?" Derek Harvey smiled his obnoxious, lewd smile. "But since you are such a pig-headed fool, I'm afraid that I'll have to resort to physical means to make you submit to my demands." A pang of horror shot through Penny when he uttered those words, making her cheek twitch with fear. Abruptly, she dashed for the door in a bid to escape. The two bodyguards grasped her wrists and held her back. "Help! Someone help me, please!" Penny screamed at the top of her lungs. "Hetty, save your breath, my dear. I've picked this hour for our meeting as all of your staff have already left for home." Derek Harvey flashed a grotesque grin. "You can shout all you want. Nobody will come to save you." Tears welled up in Penny's eyes as she plunged into despair, feeling like a trapped animal. She had never expected Derek Harvey to be such a vicious monster. "Oh baby, why are you crying? Daddy is here." Derek Harvey pressed closer to her with a sneer on his repugnant face, spinning his nasty web around Penny, who had been pinned down by his bodyguards. Bang! A thunderous thud reverberated around the room. The meeting room's door was booted open with such force that it flew off its hinge and landed with a thud right under the nose of Derek Harvey and his men, leaving them in shock, mouths agape. A man walked into the room. His strong, lean body looked as fit as a professional athlete, while his exquisite looks appeared good enough to grace the cover of magazines. He was Nathan Cross. Penny gave a start the moment she saw Nathan. It's him. She had fought back her tears even when Derek Harvey had almost molested her, yet the sight of Nathan made her tears run like rivulets down her cheeks. A sharp pain stung Nathan's heart upon seeing Penny cry like a baby, melting the layers of ice within him. 5 years ago, she had saved him in a chance encounter. Yet, in his inebriated state, he had taken her by force and had non-consensual sex with her. Over the past 5 years, Nathan had never stopped looking for her. Her face filled his dreams every night. She was incontestably the most unforgettable woman he had met. Now that they found each other again, the inexplicable look in their eyes spoke 1,000 words. Derek Harvey's voice snapped both of them back to their senses. "Who the hell are you?" His eyes were narrowed and full of menace as he assessed Nathan, who was dressed in civilian clothes. "Come with me." Nathan beckoned to Penny with his gaze fixed on her. He did not answer Derek Harvey's question, nor did he spare him a glance. Penny shook her head fervently. Her tears were streaming down like waterfalls. This was the man who had raped her 5 years ago, bringing shame to her family as he turned her into the laughingstock of the entire Channing. Her own resilience amazed her. She survived the scathing tirade of mockery and insults that the others had launched at her. Yet the same man who was now standing in front of her had not shown the slightest bit of compassion to her plight. The first sentence he had uttered was a condescending order to leave with him. "What do you take me for? A slave?" Derek Harvey had been so close to laying his hands on Penny, but Nathan's sudden appearance thwarted his grand scheme. His eyes bulged angrily while his flabby chin quivered with rage when he heard that Nathan was going to take Penny away with him. "How dare you meddle in my affairs, you punk!" He snarled. "Quinn, Luke, I want you to smash his legs and make sure that he'll never be able to walk again." "Yes, boss." The two towering bodyguards spread their claws and lunged at Nathan Cross. Boom, bang. With 2 firm kicks, Nathan sent them flying backward, and they landed heavily on the floor. The force had broken their ribs, leaving 2 huge indentations in their chests. Both the men fell unconscious. With the 2 bodyguards taken care of, Nathan sauntered towards Derek Harvey with his cold killer stare. How dare you? What do you think you're doing? Derek Harvey tried to put up a brave front, even though he knew he had been completely overpowered by Nathan. Don't you know who I am? I'm Derek Harvey, the boss of Mingda Corporation. No one dares to touch me in the whole of Channing, knowing that I'll beat the shit out of them should they even harm a hair of mine. Nathan stood directly in front of him with a disinterested look. Are you done with your nonsense? His reply astounded Derek Harvey, who was under the impression that everyone would shun away with fear when they heard his name. But this guy seemed impervious to his threat. Unwarily, Nathan raised his leg and stomped on Derek Harvey's left leg with brutal force. Crack, came the sound of his fractured bone. Nathan had broken Derek's left fibula, which sent Derek Harvey rolling and writhing in pain on the floor, wailing like a banshee. With an unconcerned look, Nathan turned and walked towards Penny, who was watching with eyes as big as saucers. Come with me. His tone had softened. No way. She bit her lip resolutely. It was impossible to forgive a monster like him who had utterly ruined her life. I've been looking for you everywhere since I first met you 5 years ago. I shall never let you leave my sight again. With that being said, he scooped her up and strode out of the room. The one and the only. See to the reunion of father and daughter. Penny did not struggle in his arms. It was as if she had lost her will to fight. The only sign of defiance was the tears that spilled over the corners of her eyes. She had lived her life in the past 5 years like a zombie, benumbing herself to the relentless insults and humiliation targeted at her. She had thought of ending her life several times to escape from the pain and misery, but each time, her daughter's face would surface in her mind. With her daughter as her sole anchor, Penny gritted her teeth and forged onward. It was all because of this devil who had torn her life apart. Nathan was the one who had brought the relentless misery and despair upon her and her daughter. She swore that she would strive to work hard and stay single for the rest of her life. Her only purpose was to make up for her daughter's sufferings by giving her a blissful and promising future. Little did she know that the man who had started the tragedy 5 years ago and brought upon the most torturous times of her life was now back to haunt her. It was like rubbing salt in her wound. Upon his reappearance, all the poignant memories which had been long buried came back to life, flashing across her mind like indelible ghosts. How she yearned for a break. She prayed to God for a little salvation, earnestly begging the heavens to stop piling up on her hardships. The sight of Penny's piteous state was unbearable to Nathan. He gently put her down and let her stand on her feet. Can you give me a chance to make up to you and our daughter, please? A stone-hearted creature like him was a complete stranger to tenderness, but he begged for the first time in the gentlest manner he could muster. For the sake of our daughter, and for you as well, please give me a chance. He pleaded. Penny quivered uncontrollably when he uttered our daughter. It gifted her with a glint of hope as she slowly lifted her eyes. Trust me, I know what kind of hell you both have gone through over the years. Nathan continued to plead in his soft voice. I'll know that you loathe me too, but please give me a chance to make amends. Children from single-parent families are more prone to suffer from personality disorders, which may affect their overall well-being. Please give me a chance, Penny. Penny's eyes reflected a whirlwind of emotions as she ruminated on his words. Queenie was growing up fast and getting more sensible by the day. A family without a father could never be complete, let alone offer a sense of normalcy and oneness to the child. It broke her heart whenever she saw the pitiful look on Queenie's face when she asked for her papa. Yet, she could only turn away and wipe her tears as she had no answer for her dear daughter. Yes, Queenie needs a father. The determination in Nathan's eyes only fueled her conviction. It took her a long time to decide, but she finally agreed. All right, I'll give you a chance to reunite with your daughter. I'm giving you the chance because she needs a papa in her life. But let me give you a stern warning. Do nothing that might upset her. And just to be clear, the fact that Queenie calls you papa does not mean you are my husband. Do you get it? Yes. Nathan nodded his affirmation. Nathan knew well that Penny was giving him the opportunity to reunite with Queenie because she wanted the young girl to have a bright future. It would take a lifetime for her to forgive him for the pain he had inflicted on her, let alone take him as her husband. Those years of suffering in silence had spun an invisible web within her, creating a deadly mess of entangled knots. He knew that it would take time to untwine and unravel those knots of pain and grievances. Meanwhile, Inside the elementary classroom of Golden Apple Kindergarten, the teacher was nowhere to be seen. A pudgy boy decked in designer wear was gloating with delight, pulling on a rope. The other end of the rope was tied to the neck of a little girl who was being towed along like a puppy. The fat boy tugged on the makeshift leash impatiently and shouted at her, "Don't you know you're my dog, Queenie? Dogs are supposed to bark. Do it now." The victim crawled on her limbs like a puppy, her grubby face stained with chalk dust. She was a little girl around the age of 4. Underneath the grime and dust was a well-defined face with the winsome features of a pretty, innocent young girl. The fat boy kept tugging at the rope around her neck, which left her gasping for air. Unsatisfied with her inaction, the fat boy pestered her again. "Queenie, I'm warning you, bark, or I'll get everyone to wallop you. You're a stupid bee who doesn't even have a father." Her eyes red-rimmed. Queenie sobbed pitifully. "No, don't call me a bee, I'm not. Listen, I am the king of this place, and when I say you'd better act like one. Now, do as I say and bark like a dog." The fat boy was relentlessly cruel and demanding. The rest of the kids laughed at what they saw, as if they were watching a comical cartoon. Nathan and Penny had just reached the entrance of the classroom. The sight of her daughter being leashed like a puppy threw Penny into a state of shock. She rushed forward and lifted Queenie into her arms. She untied the rope from Queenie's neck and tossed it away as if it were a repulsive snake. "What happened to you, Queenie?" She asked worriedly, her eyes burning with anger. Queenie could not withhold her tears any longer upon seeing her mother. Like a dam that had exploded, she sobbed until her little body trembled. "Mama, Max Zan has said that I'm a bee and that he wants me to bark like a dog. Otherwise, he would get everybody in the class to beat me up." What? Gripped with rage, fury coursed through Penny's veins, making her quiver. She was well aware of this fat bully named Max Zan. He always picked on Queenie as his target. It stunned her when she saw the inhumane treatment that Queenie was receiving from him. Penny held Queenie dearly as she consoled her. "You have a papa, Queenie. They're wrong to call you a bee." Queenie sobbed and replied through hiccups, "No, Queenie has no papa. No, Queenie, you have a papa. I'm your papa." Exclaimed Nathan, whose heart was ripped apart when he heard Queenie's heart-wrenching cries. Queenie stopped sobbing as she turned quizzically to her mother. "Mama, is he really my papa?" "Yes, he's your papa, Queenie. He just retired from the army." Penny nodded fervently. "Papa." Queenie was overwhelmed with joy as she raced towards Nathan, who picked her up into his arms as his heart filled with incandescent love. With her little arms wrapped around his neck, Queenie was consumed with such intense happiness that she could not stop calling him Papa, Papa. Nathan was equally swamped with tenderness and love as he responded to her whimpers with passion and affection. Penny observed the interaction between the pair, full of giggles and chuckles. From the sideline, she shuddered with joy as it all seemed so warm and cozy, yet it was unbelievably real. This was the first time Queenie felt the warmth and love of a father. Still huddled close to her father, Queenie repeatedly called him Papa till her voice became hoarse. His appearance filled her small world with such jubilation, giving her a sense of pride that she had never experienced before in her young life. She turned around and smirked at the fat boy. "Look here, I'm not a bee, I have a papa too." The fat boy rebutted sarcastically. "He isn't your papa. My mummy says that you're a bee because your mother is a loose woman who sleeps around with men. She got herself pregnant, and that's how you came along. That's why you have no papa." A shadow slipped across Nathan's face when he heard those words. Penny could not hold back any longer. She cautioned the fat boy in a stern tone. "Hey, little fellow, watch your words. If you keep being mean and disrespectful, I'm going to tell your teacher about it and make sure that you receive a good lecture from her." Wah! The fat boy squalled with fear when he heard what Penny had said. "What happened to you, my sweetie? Did someone bully you?" Just then, a high-pitched, penetrating voice pierced the air like the shrills of a witch. A plump woman scurried into the classroom, her fury so apparent that one could imagine steam spurting out of her ears. She looked to be middle-aged and was clad head to toe in designer clothing. Lavish jewelry and diamonds weighed down her stubby fingers, making her appear ostentatious. The tacky woman was the mother of the fat boy. She was here to pick him up after school. The moment he saw his mother, the fat boy pointed at Penny and cried, "It's her, Mummy. She's bullied me and hit me." The one and the only. C3 soon it will be payback time. How dare you hit my son? B. I'll beat the shit out of you. Without giving Penny any room for explanation, Mrs. Zan raised her fleshy arm and swung it towards Penny's delicate face. Penny Smith tried to explain the situation to Mrs. Zan, but Mrs. Zan's demeanor was simply overbearing, to the point of being barbaric. Mrs. Zan appeared to be the kind of woman who would raise her hand on a whim. Caught off guard, Penny could not dodge the assault in time. The flesh on Mrs. Zan's arm jiggled from her force, and her palm was about to strike Penny's face. Nathan stepped in at the nick of time. With Queenie held in his left arm, Nathan immediately extended his right arm to grasp Mrs. Zan's wrist. Mrs. Zan's meaty palm was mere inches away from Penny's face. Even so, it hung stationary in midair as if it had been frozen. Her palm was unable to inch forward. Slap. Before she knew it, Nathan had withdrawn his hand in a flash and landed a harsh slap on her face. Nathan slapped her as if he were swatting an irritating mosquito. The slap was of such great magnitude that it almost caused her to see stars. Her hair that had been arranged in a posh updo was now disheveled. She stared incredulously at Nathan as she covered her swollen cheek with her hand. How dare you slap me in such a manner? She screeched. You deserve this for being a lousy role model for your kids. How could you treat others with such insolence, without even bothering to uncover the truth of the matter? Meanwhile, the teacher was back from her bathroom break. Stupefied by the sudden outbreak of events, she rushed over frantically and tried to placate everyone. Are you okay, Mrs. Zan? Mrs. Zan had barely recovered from the shock of being slapped by Nathan. She brushed the teacher aside with and shrieked hysterically at Nathan. You have the guts to slap me? Are you trying to die? Just wait and see what will become of you. With that being said, she pulled out her phone and dialed a number. After a few minutes, the screeching sound of the car tires traveled from outside the room. 2 Mercedes-Benzes sped into the kindergarten compound, charging through the entrance at breakneck speed. They came to a sudden halt upon arriving at the classroom building. 5 men dressed in slick outfits alighted from both cars. Their leader was a hulking man with a face that was contorted with menace and cruelty. He stormed into the classroom, flanked by 4 bodyguards, and roared like a savage beast. Who was the idiot who'd bullied my wife and kid? What took you so long to get here, honey? Mrs. Zan was over the moon when she saw his repulsive face. She waddled over to him like an inflated goose, her fat hips swaying from side to side. Don't you know he could have beaten us to death if you'd arrived a tad bit later? The man cast a bestial look around the room and demanded, who's the idiot who had the nerve to beat my wife? Doesn't he know who I am? I'm Walter Zan. This man is Walter Zan? The worried look in Penny's eyes intensified when she heard the name. Notorious in Channing for his wealth and status, he was a ruthless and cruel character. Mrs. Zan pointed towards Nathan and Penny. That is the sickening couple who bullied us, honey. She scoffed. I demand that you make them compensate me with a hefty sum, or I'll move out with our son, leaving you for good. Walter Zan slid his eyes and sneered. That's just a piece of cake for me, my dear. I'll slap the woman till she loses all the teeth. As for the man, I'll chop off the hand that hit you. The fat boy cried out in excitement. Daddy, don't forget their daughter, Queenie, as well. I want you to beat her up for bullying me. Walter Zan smiled as he caressed his son's head. Sure, my boy. I'll tie her on a leash and make her crawl on the floor so that you can treat her like a dog. Walter Zan's words were the most beautiful arias to their ears. His wife swooned with delight while his fat son clapped his hands ecstatically. Everyone in the kindergarten, including teachers and parents who had come to fetch their children, was watching with horror from a distance. They all felt sorry for Nathan and his family upon hearing Walter's declaration, as if it had been set in stone. Thou shalt not offend Walter Zan lest you feel suicidal. Even Penny was getting worried. She stepped forward and tried to explain. Please let me explain the matter to you, Mr. Zan. I'm Penny Smith from the Smith family. This is all a misunderstanding. Don't give me that crap. I don't need any explanation. Walter Zan snorted. Nobody would dare to defy me. It's my word that counts. Besides, what is the Smith family to me? Don't waste your time trying to intimidate me with that lame family of yours. And don't think that I'm unaware of your dishonored past too. You're the shameless daughter from the Smith family, who had slept around with men and given birth to a child without a husband. You should count your blessings that your old man still keeps you in the family. How dare you get a sucker like him to bully my wife? I'm going to teach you a bloody lesson today on behalf of your family, and I'll make sure that it's the most painful lesson in your life. Walter Zahn shouted at his 4 bodyguards. What are you guys waiting for? Move. Got it, boss. The 4 of them gave a synchronous answer and ferociously lunged at Nathan and his family. Go to hell. They yelled. A cold spark flashed across Nathan's eyes as he turned to Penny. Shield Queenie's eyes. Don't let her see this. Penny was grappling with the meaning of his instruction, but she soon realized what he was going to do. She immediately covered Queenie's eyes with her hand. Nathan stepped forward and delivered a knockout punch to the first man who had charged at him. Boom. 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 With a few thuds, the men fell to the ground in succession, like dominoes. Everyone present gasped in awe at Nathan's agility and aggression. He then walked directly to Walter Zahn. Clamping his hand on Walter's shoulder, he ordered sharply, kneel. His hand seemed to weigh like a ton of bricks on Walter's shoulder and he crumpled to his knees. Thump. Walter Zahn's knees slammed on the floor, and his features twisted in agony. Slap. Before he could even scream, Nathan landed a series of thunderous slaps on both his cheeks. Walter Zahn's face began to swell as blood dripped from the corners of his lips. You have such nerve to hit me like this. He stared fixedly at Nathan with a venomous look. Wait till you find out who you're dealing with, you little muppet, he spat. Don't you know who my boss is? He's someone who can squash you like a cockroach for laying your hand on me. He's Thomas Dunn. Trust me, I can make your wife and child perish with a single phone call. Yes, Thomas Dunn. The almighty Thomas Dunn. Thomas Dunn was the captain of the armed forces in the Eastern District. Simply put, they regarded him as the warlord of the Eastern District. Ruthless and rapacious, he was infamous for turning a blind eye to the vices of the filthy rich. Walter Zahn had always been in his good books. Hence, Thomas regarded him as one of his right-hand men. Everybody cast a sympathetic look at Nathan when they heard the mention of Thomas Dunn, fearing the worst for Nathan and his family. They were convinced that Nathan would soon be doomed as they murmured a prayer for him. Even though they were impressed by Nathan's sublime skills, there was simply no way he could defend himself against an army. They lamented Nathan's sorrowful fate. Instead of losing a leg, it would now cost him his life. Penny was no less concerned than the rest as she watched from afar with Queenie in her arms. The turn of events filled her lovely face with unease. Nathan seemed undaunted by Walter's threats. His eyes took on a frosty look as he mocked. Sounds too good to be true. Do you think that I'm lying? Walter's eyes seemed to bulge out of his skull as he glared menacingly at Nathan. Let me make that call, and I bet you'll be crying like a baby in 10 minutes' time. I'll make you wish that you could crawl back into your mother's womb. Thump. He had barely finished his sentence when something was thrown at his face. It was a rugged, shock-resistant mobile phone. Walter darted his eyes between the phone and Nathan, looking nonplussed. You have 10 minutes to call for help. Nathan uttered indifferently. Mobilize all your men and show me what you've got, and make sure that you get all your big guns here to support you. Whether you're coming at me or my family, just bring your A game. The one and the only. C4. What a spectacular scene. What an outrageous, pompous ass. Walter Zahn seethed and cursed as he picked up the phone and called Thomas Dunn to seek his help. His voice sounded like a foghorn. Soon you'll get to experience living hell. He grinned grotesquely at Nathan after he had made the call. Everybody was shaking their heads, lamenting Nathan's folly. To the onlookers, Nathan had committed a suicidal act. Rather than using the opportunity to escape, he had just sent himself to the gallows when he allowed Walter Zahn to seek help from Thomas Dunn. Anxiety was all over her face as Penny scurried over with Queenie in her arms. We should leave now, Nathan. She persuaded. Thomas Dunn is the big daddy here in Eastern District. He's a vicious guy who sides with vile people like Walter Zahn. Just leave it to me, Penny. He said coolly. It'll save us the trouble of dealing with them one at a time. Let me take care of them in one go. It took less than 10 minutes before the second round of commotion broke out again in the otherwise harmonious kindergarten. This time, it was an even bigger one. Someone stared out of the window and shouted in amazement. Wow, what a spectacular sight. Look at the troops of soldiers who are standing outside. Even the military trucks have arrived in dozens. One by one, dozens of military trucks rolled stridently into the kindergarten with the grandeur of a military procession. Quick. Quick. Thousands of soldiers in camouflage uniforms dismounted from the trucks when they came to a halt and assembled themselves in an organized formation. Soon after, a brawny man with thick sideburns stepped out of a military jeep. He was Thomas Dunn, the person whom Walter Zahn had called for help. Squad 1 and Squad 2, seal off the streets. I want this kindergarten to be fully enclosed. Without my permission, not even a bird can enter or leave the vicinity. Thomas Dunn's oratant voice resounded like a gong as he belted out the orders. Understood, sir. We shall do everything to ensure accomplishment of mission. Squad 1 and Squad 2 answered in synchrony as they sprang into action immediately. In the blink of an eye, the kindergarten was surrounded. Thomas Dunn drew out a handgun from his waistband and gestured towards his remaining squad. Follow me. Let's find out who has the audacity to touch my man. I'll make sure to beat the hell out of him. One by one, the soldiers barged into the classroom, wielding weapons that ranged from bayonets to machine guns, and even grenades. They surrounded the whole kindergarten in a flash, with every corner guarded by soldiers. Freeze. The sight of Thomas Dunn was enough to send shivers down everyone's spines, and they felt increasingly sorry for Nathan and his family. Now that he had the backing of Thomas Dunn, Walter Zahn was back to his arrogant self. Your end is near, he gloated with malignant pleasure. Next, he turned to Thomas Dunn and buttered him up. I'm so glad that you're finally here, Mr. Dunn. Please accept my heartfelt gratitude for helping me to seek justice. Please take pity on my family and don't let him escape scot-free. Indeed, Mr. Dunn. Mrs. Zahn joined in the plea with their fat son and wept crocodile tears. Look at how cruel he is, torturing us. Please give us the justice we deserve. Thomas Dunn frowned at the sight of Walter Zahn's bodyguards lying on the floor, writhing in pain. What happened? He turned to Walter, whose face was smeared with blood. All thanks to him. Walter Zahn pointed at Nathan with scathing resentment. This savage hooligan not only bullied my wife and my kid, but he also assaulted my bodyguards and made me kneel in front of him. Thomas Dunn's gaze followed Walter's finger. His eyes met Nathan's steady gaze. There was a discernible change in his demeanor, and his eyes flickered. I've never been humiliated in such a way before, Mr. Dunn. Walter Zahn sulked in defeat as he stood beside Thomas Dunn. He turned me into the laughingstock of Channing. Please help me seek revenge. Thomas Dunn's eyes lingered on Nathan for a while before he turned to Walter Zahn. So, what would you like me to do? As if he were about to receive an honorary award, Walter Zahn straightened his back and lifted his head high with his chest puffed out. He tauntingly side-eyed Nathan and his family before addressing everyone in his loud and unpleasant voice. Well, everyone in Channing knows that I'm a man of my word. Since I've promised to break his arm, I need to stick to my word. But the number has changed. I want to break both of his arms instead of one. Mrs. Zahn jumped in. We should not let that bee leave unscathed. Slap her until she's left with no more teeth. Well said. Thomas Dunn looked impressed. With that being said, he turned to face his soldiers and commanded, take them down. He pointed at Walter Zahn and his wife. Break both the arms of the man and slap the woman until she's toothless. What? Everybody at the scene stood transfixed, wide-eyed and open-mouthed. Nobody saw this coming. They all expected Nathan and his family to perish instead of Walter Zahn and his wife. They were utterly dazed. What just happened? Walter Zahn and his wife were shocked to the core too. The soldiers sprang into action once Thomas gave his orders, ready to launch a blistering attack on the couple. What's going on here, Mr. Dunn? Walter Zahn floundered as he struggled in vain to free himself. Is this some kind of mistake, Mr. Dunn? Mrs. Zahn's voice quivered with fear. Shouldn't it be targeting the wretched couple instead of us? Shut up. Thomas Dunn bellowed at them before pointing at Nathan, who was standing idly at a distance with his hands behind his back. Do you know who he really is? And how much he means to me? He is my God, my faith, and my belief all in one. I have pledged my life and soul to him, and I would never defy him. I swore to serve him wholeheartedly, with every ounce of my strength. Who do you think you are to insult my hero? You're just some dispensable lackeys of mine. Walter Zahn and his wife were stumped. They gazed despairingly at Nathan, horror evident in their eyes. They knew that they were in deep trouble for offending Thomas's beloved idol. He had made it clear that he worshipped Nathan like his god. Their faces turned ashen. With one forceful thrust of their legs, Thomas Dunn's soldiers kicked Walter Zahn to the floor before he could even open his mouth to beg for his life. Crack, crack, they broke both his arms. The room was filled with Walter Zahn's blood-curdling shrieks. Two men in suits grasped Mrs. Zahn by her arms while another man unleashed a series of unforgiving slaps on her cheeks. One by one, her teeth popped out from her mouth, stained with blood. Thump, thump, both lay prostrate in front of Nathan, Walter Zahn with his broken arms and Mrs. Zahn, who had lost all her teeth. Thomas Dunn quickly approached Nathan. He started to get down on his knees in a gesture of respect. "L.M. Thomas Dunn, General, generally speaking, you're no longer working under me, so there's no need for the formalities." Nathan stretched out his arm and halted him from kneeling. Initially, the name Thomas Dunn did not ring any bells with Nathan, but the penny dropped when he saw Thomas Dunn's face. He was one of Nathan's personal guards. Generally speaking, Thomas Dunn started when he heard Nathan's queer response, but it took him less than 2 seconds to decipher the intention behind his response. Nathan Cross wanted to keep his identity a secret. He replied earnestly, "It's my honor to have served you in the North, sir. I'll forever be under your command." Thomas Dunn had suffered an injury while he was a personal guard of the general, hence they had transferred him to the Eastern District hitherto. Given his proximity to Nathan, his admiration for the general was inexorably greater than the other soldiers. He idolized Nathan to the extent of worshipping him as a pillar of his faith. It was like a dream come true for him to meet his hero again. His churning emotions almost moved him to tears when he saw Nathan. A sense of defeat washed over Walter Zahn and his wife when they saw Thomas Dunn going down on his knees in front of Nathan. He resembled a tamed lion bowing down to its majestic master. They knew that this was not their day. Gone was their smug and overbearing insolence. Even the slightest tinge of hatred had faded away from their eyes, leaving behind fear, despair, and regret.